Yeah, hello everyone. Namaste. I am Ramnath who would like to share with you some information on the brain analysis based on several articles and videos that I have gone through. This perception impacts brain analysis part 2 is a very vast subject and I have learned very little of it out of my curiosity. So please take useful information from this if you ever found. As always, please feel free to provide your comments or any suggestions. Thank you. Yeah, formation of perception. The brain doesn't passively perceive the information that it is receiving, but it also provides information to help complete whatever it is sensing. Here, the soccer ball, which is seen at the top, is not only two-dimensional as seen at the in the retina, but it is actually perceived as a three-dimensional object. Okay, and in this picture, which is a Rubin's vase, this is a bistable and ambiguous picture. So here a single stimuli can result in more than one percept. For example, this Rubin's vase can be interpreted either as a vase or as two faces. Okay, so that is why it is called a bistable form. And now I will show you different pictures in succession. Please mention whether it is a mammal or not by just saying yes or no. Okay, I will show you the pictures. You respond quickly. Okay, now if you observe, you might be able to mention the previous pictures quickly and correctly. But when it comes to this one, based on the prompt, most probably you would have mentioned that this is a rabbit. Okay, because sensory organs pull in the world raw data which is disassembled into little bits of information, then it is reassembled in the brain to form your own model of the world, which is influenced by one's perception. Because I have mentioned a mammal, which mammal do you see? There is a highly likelihood that you would have seen it as a rabbit, because we are influencing the outcome. Okay, so that is why the brain, when it is making a perception, it is basically trying to add value to what it is seeing or sensing. So positive affirmations help in forming better perceptions. Yeah, most of us heard that Sarvendriyanam Nayanam Pradhanam. There is a lot of truth in saying that. The brain anatomy in terms of related areas to different sensory stimuli like touch, sound, visual, etc. It is observed that more than 50% of the surface of the brain is devoted to processing visual information alone. Even though brain visual areas have probably been studied more than any other region, it is still less understood. That is why understanding how vision works may reveal a key to understanding how the brain works as a whole. When scientists back in 1950s met to talk about artificial intelligence, they thought that teaching a computer to play chess would be very difficult, but teaching a computer to see and perceive it would be easy. What researchers now know is that human visual perception is incredibly complicated. While we have developed software that can beat the best chess master, however, computer models have barely scratched the surface of the human vision. Here I want you to understand that visual perception is completely different to how clearly a person sees. an object with or without any spectacles or contact lenses. Another point to make is human vision is much more than a camera we use. Yeah, coming to the visual perception in more detail, visual perception is a complex process that allows us to connect with the surrounding world received by our visual senses, then making it sense out of what is received by taking the signals from the eyes to thalamus to several areas of the neocortex for further processing. Yeah, theories and observations of visual perception led to the development of computer vision. This is the picture of 2022 Toyota car which uses driver assist technology. This car special hardware structures and software algorithms interprets the images coming from a visual sensor. In the coming slides, we will understand how the stimuli from the environment is processed by the brain. As we know, we see objects in the presence of light, which is part of the visible spectrum. That is a tiny portion of the enormous electromagnetic waves. The light falling on the object gets reflected and falls onto the eyes. So the retina processes 15 different types of uh, um, object matter. For example, color of the object, size of the object, position of the object, orientation, mass, temperature, like that. So this information is passed on to thalamus via the optic nerve. So from here, this is the optic nerve. So it will be passed on to the thalamus. From thalamus, again, it is passed on to the visual cortex after some processing. So this visual cortex is called occipital lobe. From there, again, it will be passed on to other parts of the brain. Okay, so we will know a little bit more about what happens in the eyes. Okay, the eye contains, as we mentioned, photoreceptor photosensitive cells like rods, cones and ganglion cells. So these cells capture the information of the object in terms of the intensity, color, temperature, position, like that. And the cones, if we observe, there are three types mainly. So some of the cones are sensitive to the blue light, and some are sensitive to the green light, some are sensitive to the red light. Thus, we will be able to see the RGB, visible spectrum. So that is why we are not able to see ultraviolet light and the infrared light because of the cones. So if you observe the object seen by the eye, reflected light, so it is processed in the retina. So the environmental stimulus will reach the retina. From there, receptive photoreceptive cells will take it and collect the information and will pass it on to thalamus, this one, through the optic nerve, and then from there it will pass it on to the occipital lobe. Here the perception and recognition will happen, and then further actions will be taken as per the situation. Visual perception aids in analyzing depth of objects. Our brain perceives depth by using binocular cues and monocular cues, which induce depth in objects. Monocular means with one eye. Binocular means obviously two eyes. So here binocular vision happens because each eye receives a different image. So these positional differences are referred to as disparities which are processed in the visual cortex of the brain to yield depth perception. That is how we will figure out the three-dimensional view. To understand more on the bipolar disparities, we need to understand first the fixated point with respect to the eyes. Fixated point here means a point placed on the visual field where the image of the object appears on the fovea point on both eyes. Okay, so we'll figure out what is the fovea point. Here, this is the eye, this whole thing is retina, and this is the fovea point. This is the lens. So when the object is placed in certain location, then it is falling on the fovea point. So when it is in different locations, then it will fall on the retina in different locations. When the object exists on the fovea point, fixated point, in both left eye and the right eye, the image falls on the fovea point. Okay, so when the object is kept far away point, then you will understand that the left eye, when it as it sees, is more the left of the object, and the right eye will see more of the right eye object, right eye of the object. So, and when you see the nearby objects compared to the fixated point, then you will understand that the object right portion is more seen even in the left eye, and even in the right eye more of the right portion is seen towards the fixated point. So here this portion is seen, this portion is seen, this will be cut off, that will be cut off. So these small differences will help us in arriving at the depth estimation. We will find out more details on the bipolar disparities. So you will observe here that the point of fixation is represented by the black dot. Here the left eye and the right eye, in both cases the image is falling at the fovea point. Okay, that is why it is called point of fixation. Now coming to the blue object, which is closer with respect to the fixation point, you will observe that the right eye is subtending an angle dm and it is slightly shifted, and in the case of the left eye, it is falling, the image is falling on the fovea point. These are the cues given through the optic nerve to the visual cortex, by which the brain will be able to figure out the depth of the blue object. Coming to this one, green point, which is far away with respect to the fixation point, you will observe that the right eye, it is falling on the fovea point, the image, and in the case of the left eye, it is slightly shifted. So the shifted amount is df and the angle subtended is df, and it need not be same actually. So with these cues, then we will be able to, the brain will be able to know how much is the distance and depth it is away. However, this red object and green object, with respect to the center of the eye, it is same. But if you observe the angle subtended and the location where it is, the image is falling now on the right eye will be different. Okay, so this df angle, and in the left eye it is falling on the fovea point, and if you observe the blue object which was near to the fixation point, that angle subtending and this angle subtended may be same, but based on its location, whether it is falling to the right of the fovea point or to the left of the fovea point, these are the cues given to the brain which will determine whether the object is near or far away. Okay, so having two eyes focused on an object allows us to triangulate its position with a higher degree of accuracy. Thus, we are able to see a better depth perception. As mentioned earlier, our brain perceives depth by using binocular cues and monocular cues, which induce depth in objects. So monocular cues do not provide depth cues that are as accurate as binocular cues. If only one eye is sending depth cues to the brain, your vision becomes less three-dimensional. However, you will still be able to gauge the depth, but just less accurately compared to if it had been with binocular cues. So assume that you want to check with the how well one eye perceives the depth. Okay, so see that now I am able to close it. Okay, so this one, now I will close one eye and you will see that how I will be able to perceive, put the cap. I am able to do. Missed it. Got it. So sometimes I will miss it. So that is why I just wanted to prove that monocular depth is less accurate but not zero. Okay, I'll give some more details in the next slides. Yeah, let us understand how the object placed in front of the eyes is processed. Okay, so this part is falling at the fovea point and this part of the object is falling at the fovea of the right eye. It need not be at the middle. Okay, so so portion of this data is falling into the right eye in this manner, and portion of the right eye of the object with respect to this mark which is falling into the left eye in this way. We will analyze it further, and whatever is falling onto the blind spot here to the left of this one and to the blind spot here to the left of this one, they are all collected and then it is sent to the visual cortex. In the same way, corresponding to the blind spot to the right of it, in the case of left eye, corresponding to the blind spot in the right eye to the right of it is collected here, collected, and it is sent to the right of the visual cortex. So this is the left hemisphere, right hemisphere. So that is how the disparities will be assessed and the depth perception is achieved. So now we will also see how with single eye also it can happen. Okay. So these are the two eyes. Okay. So this is the same object placed here, and you will observe that the right side of the part of the object is falling onto the left eye in this location of the retina, and the right side of the object is falling on in this location of the retina. In the same way, left side of the object is falling on the retina of the right eye in this direction, and in this left eye it is falling in this location. So assuming that we are concerned more only about the right eye, then you will observe that you have the right side of the object information here, left side of the object information stored here. So based on this, you will be able to figure out the depth perception and the distance locations, everything based on one eye only. Only in the case of a single point, there will be slight difficulty. And one more thing is, definitely compared to the both eyes, one eye processing will be slightly less inaccurate, less accurate. Yeah, we will understand a little bit more on the bipolar disparities, and also we'll figure out why some far away distances we cannot completely figure out. So as we know, this is the fovea point on the retina and this is the lens. So when there is an object which is kept at one location away from the eye, and when the image of that falls on the fovea point on both the eyes, then that is called point of fixation, as we know. So now when there is an object which is placed away from the fixation point, assume fixation point is here, when the object here now P is placed away from the fixation point, then the image is forming on the retina. By the way, we need to understand that the image of the image placed at the point P got to form on the retina. There is no other choice. Okay, so the focal length of the lens has to be adjusted in such a way that it needs to form on the retina. Okay, so in cases when that is not forming on the retina, that means whether it is inside or away, outside, away, then only we need the spectacles. Okay, so now we will assume that the focal length of the eye is able to be adjusted and the retina is the image is forming on the retina. So to facilitate that one, these muscles here, these are called ciliary muscles. By controlling the ligaments here, those small ligaments here, okay, the lens thickness will be controlled. So in this case, the ciliary muscles here through these ligaments, the lens is made thin, so they are stretched. These ligaments stretch, and then the focal length is adjusted. Coming to the other case where the object at Q is closer to the eye compared to the fixation point. Fixation point is here, the object is here. So now again by changing the focal length of the eye, the image got to form on the retina only. For that to happen, again the ciliary muscles here, through the help of the ligaments, they relax a bit so that the lens becomes slightly thicker, so that the focal length gets adjusted and the image falls on the retina. So this step is called accommodation. Okay, so now let us understand a little bit more further on objects which are near and far away from the eye. Okay, assume that here we need to know that focal length of the eye is close to 1.8 centimeter, and we will also assume that focal length of the eye is almost constant. Okay, so for the simplicity of the analysis, so using the same lens maker's formula, 1 by f equal to 1 by d0 plus 1 by di. D0 stands for object distance from the eye, di stands for image distance from the eye, and which is placed on the retina. So here if you observe, the two objects are 50 meters away and 100 meters away, and the images forming on the retina are here, assume 1.80065, 1.8032. Here what we need to understand is the images are not forming on the retina in different locations. They are forming on the retina only, but the focal length is getting adjusted. So certainly the images are again forming on the retina only and one location, and their heights will be changing though, but the focal length, how much ever the slight amounts changing, that will be passed on as Q to the visual cortex and for the further analysis of the depth perception. So now we will also understand how the objects which are placed 50 meters away, but now these 50 meters away objects are 1000 meters away and 1050 meters away. Okay, now if you observe, the image distances are this much. So now if you observe, the resolution, what it needs to understand is 80003. Until that the image distance is same. That means like focal length need to be adjusted such a micro level that it will not be able to adjust so closely. That is why we will see that these two objects, even though compared to the earlier case and now both are 50 meters away, but if you observe, these two objects appear to be on the same plane. Okay, so that is why we will find that far away hills are greener. Causes of visual depth perception are many. However, we will know a few here. One is aerial perspective, another is linear perspective, last one is relative sizes, based on which we can perceive depth. Coming to the aerial perspective, here if you see the object near to the audience here is in natural color. It has usually have all the shades, and if you go away from the observer, you will understand that these objects, these hills are more bluish. The reason being, this is because the dust which exists within the environment which because it is so much of dust. If you take the volume of the environment within that sphere, then you will understand that due to Rayleigh's scattering of light, uh, the it is proportional to inversely proportional to fourth root of wavelength. Hence, the blue length is more scattered than the red light. Hence, the faraway objects appear more bluish. This fact is visualized in some images. In some other older time images, they used very similar information, in the sense like they visualized depth in by making the faraway objects little bit paler. So if you take the objects of Leonardo da Vinci or Ravi Verma's, then you will observe that the faraway objects appear paler compared to the nearby objects. If you see here, the nearby objects appear more dark and in right color quantities, but the faraway objects are more palish. Okay, that is how they uh, provide the depth perception. Yeah, another way of realizing depth perception is through light and shadow mechanisms. If you see here, the highlighted portion, this one, and the core shadow portion, this one. That means like light is shining in this location. So this portion is more well lit and this portion is not. So this is in the shadow region, light region. Hence, we will feel that this object is closer and this one is far away. So that is how they brought the depth perception, even though the object is drawn on a single two-dimensional paper, but still they brought out the spherical shape or a 3D shape. Okay, so that is the beauty of the drawing also. Linear perspective also gives us depth perception. That means like when parallel lines appear to meet as they travel into the distance. So for example, here the parallel lines, as we see, they appear to meet in the distance. Based on how close they are, it appears that they are so far away. And coming to the relative objects, that is also one way of giving the depth perception. If you see here, this person are of the same size, but for in the picture they have different heights. Based on this, it will appear that this person is far away. In the same way here, okay, this object is here compared to the reference, and this object is high above. So that means like the height perception is obtained. And this tree, which is having the similar type, if you see here, this is his height of the tree is smaller. So that is how we are figuring out that this one is far away. So that is how different objects in this picture appear to have different depths. And this is also depicted in the Yellow Rock Caves. So in this picture, so these people, these are all the devatas who came to witness Shiva and Parvati's marriage. If you see, they are in smaller in size. That means like they are sitting far away compared to Brahma, Vishnu. These people who are very close to Shiva, their sizes are very close to this person, Shiva. So they are very near, but these people who are slightly far away in terms of hierarchy to Shiva, they are slightly in smaller size. That means like they are far away. So that is how relative sizes is brought out, and that is how the depth perception is visualized. One time or other, you would have noticed when you are sitting in a moving bus or train, the objects which are closer to you will appear to move faster, and the objects which are away from you appear to move slower. So if you see the faraway object, say assume there is one house or one pole, whatever, you see the width of it. Okay, this is also applicable for height, but because we are tracking an object entire width, we need to consider the width here. Okay, so if you see the width of the object, it will be formed on the eye retina, and you will see that there will be an angle subtended. So this angle subtended will depend on the object, this object, how far it is away. Okay, assume that there is one house here, and far away there is one more house very similar to this. Okay, then you will find that this angle subtended by the nearer object, they will be larger than the angle subtended by the same object placed far away. So this one alpha 2, this is alpha 1. You will observe that alpha 1 is greater than alpha 2. So if you translate this width of the object in this way, the angle subtended here alpha 1, and if you see the faraway object alpha 2, the x2 will be smaller. Corresponding to this, x1 will be greater than this faraway object x2. So hence, to cross this entire distance, this is our view field. Okay, so this is how we view through a glass window or through a door or something. So if we see that one, then this object will appear to cross this region very fast compared to the faraway object. This is also depth perception. In the olden days, people used to think that the light or energy used to come from the eyes of the observer and fall on the object in front of him, and that is how he used to see the object. But over a period of time, there is a lot of growth in the research, and people have identified several parts in the brain, around 52 or more. So people have got more knowledge about how brain works. So if you see the object in front, this is the visual field. So from here, through the eyes, the optic nerve, it will go through the thalamus and reaches the brain visual cortex. From here again it will go, and based on the senses, and it will be perceived, okay, by the brain. So little bit going in detail. So this is the visual field, this is the left visual field. If you take this as reference, this is the right visual field, this is the eyes. So the data which is falling here and falling in this way will be collected. So it is collected. So as I was mentioning, near the fovea, the data is cut into two parts, one left and right. Here also fovea, it is cut into two parts. So both of these two parts will be collected in the same way here. In the same way, right parts will be collected in the visual cortex. So the objects in the retina will be converted into neural signals based on the responses of the rods and cones and other ganglions. So now they will be those neural signals will be transmitted through the optic nerve and through the optic chiasma and then to the thalamus. Thalamus also receives not only visual signal, other sensory signals also. So here the visual related lateral geniculate nucleus, this one will send the data to the visual cortex. Please note that here also thalamus is not just a pure relay. That means which will take the signals from here and sends it. It is not the only purpose. It will also process the data. So some data it will reject or it will try to um, put it in some hierarchy. So that is how it will reach the visual cortex, and this is the primary location. This is the left lobe and right lobe. Here it is the this is the location of the primary visual cortex. You can see in a better way here. Okay, from here it is coming. This is the optic chiasm. Okay, from here again it will be going to different parts of the brain. The neural signals which came to the visual cortex that exists in the occipital lobe will travel down in this way or in this way based on the ventral stream or a dorsal stream, and then the data will be recognized. That's how the perception is felt. So before we go, we will figure out that cerebral cortex has four lobes: occipital lobe, parietal lobe, frontal lobe, and temporal lobe, which does different functions. And the brain here, the outer part is mainly the cerebral cortex, and this has so many wrinkles so that no surface area gets increased and performance will improve. And cerebellum is the one which takes the actions uh, recognized by the cerebral cortex. For example, to move, to walk, or to write, all these things. And here is the thalamus from where the data earlier came to cerebral cortex, different regions. The ventral visual pathway is a functional stream involved in the visual recognition of objects. This one. Here, there is a dorsal stream also, which will be going to the parietal lobe. However, this is related to the motion of the objects. So since we are concerned to the data object recognition, we will stick to the ventral stream. Here, the ventral stream starting from the thalamus, it will be starting from the primary visual cortex and secondary visual cortex here and here shown in the red color, and then it will be going to the visual association cortex, which will be happening in the temporal lobe. So if you go a little bit more into the temporal lobe, it helps process the sensory input including pain and auditory stimuli. It also helps you understand language, memory acquisition, retaining visual memories, and both process and remember emotions. Rather than controlling the mind, temporal lobe learns from the environment, creating a complex mind-body environment interplay that constantly changes a person's subjective experiences. Though every temporal lobe has a similar structure, the experiences produced in each person's temporal lobe are unique their own. To interpret the meaning of visual stimuli, including recognizing objects, it is not enough to just see an object. For vision to be useful, you must also understand what it is that you are seeing. So that will happen in the association cortex here in the temporal lobe. So that is why the temporal lobe aids in the assignment of meaning to the sights you take in every day. Without the temporal lobe, you would not be able to recognize faces or body language. The temporal lobe is a critical link between the visual processing center in the occipital lobe and the memory stored in the temporal lobe. So this structure rapidly analyzes things you see and compares them to stored memories. That means like the data coming from the occipital lobe from top to bottom and the memory stored in the temporal lobe from bottom up, both are analyzed and then compared. So if you see here, the, the data coming from the occipital lobe, this is sense data. Actually, it is coming from the environment, from the eye to the thalamus to the occipital lobe. So that data is here, and the data from the prior belief, that means which already exists in the as memory in the temporal lobe as facts and events and other association. So those things are compared and the perception is obtained. So bottom up data, this one, and the top down data here. So top down data is coming in this way and bottom up data is coming in this way. Both are analyzed and then the exact and perfect or the partially perfect data or perception is formed. So that is how the what of the visual stimulus is arrived at. Thus, the lawful projection of visual information about the world into energy arrays would lead to a 1:1 mapping of some aspect of the world into a perceptual array, which would facilitate us to name what we see or to know whether we had ever seen it before. Perception impacts brain analysis. It is possible to project visual information about the world into energy arrays, which would lead to a 1:1 mapping of some aspect of the world into perceptual arrays, which would facilitate us to name what we see or to know whether we had ever seen it before. Perception can be enhanced by improving cognitive ability through structured approaches to adapt well in society. So sometimes we will face illusions or hallucinations, and these parts of survival situations we can handle well. And we have to promote neuroplasticity to replace localizationism. Traditional belief of localizationism states that each region of brain is dedicated for a particular type of activity. With the advent of neuroplasticity, it is evident that organization of the neural networks and their functions do change as per their new experiences. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyatva avinashyantam yapashyati sapashyati. So meaning is also given here. They alone truly see who see all beings equally, realizing that the Supreme Soul, who is imperishable, though exists in the perishable body. So this is how ultimately we need to perceive the data. Thank you.